G'day guys, today I'm just going to work up an overhead shelf in the Canopy, and it's pretty basic, it's just nuts and bolts, so really just going to go through the measurements and then show you what it looks like at the end, and we'll cover the weights and the costs of everything as well. So this is the last sort of larger item that I'll be doing in the back of the Canopy, and then everything is basically finished. There'll be small changes and tweaks as I go, but the large portion of the back is done. Now we have all the final weights and stuff after this is installed. Then I'll go through and put suspension in, and hopefully it's not too much to go after that. So the overhead shelf that I've gone with is the 1200mm overhead shelf. This is from TLX 4x4. So this set me back $695, which I'm not stoked about. I think it is a little bit pricier than I would have liked for something that's kind of simple, but it is good quality, and I just wanted to get it done and get it out of the way, so that's what the cost is. So I'll just run through the dimensions with it here on the bench. We've got, it's 1200 shelf, but it's 1190 on the inside here. They also do a 600 and 900mm variant. From this lip you have 480 to the back, and it's 150mm high. But for the install into my Canopy, it's actually going to be 170mm of clearance because it doesn't line up with my east-west extrusions on the roof. Got to put in these 20mm bars to mount into that, and 20mm spacers on the other end just so it sits level. So it'll be 170mm down. The 1200 shelf is 7.895 kilos. These spacers that I'm using, 0.294, nuts and bolts 3.377. So this Canopy is 1500, but the 1200 is the largest size they do, but it's also as large as I could fit in here. Realistically, because you've got the headboard with all the accessories on it, you don't need any longer than 1200 because there's not many things you need to store up there that are going to be 1200 long. So the mounting surfaces obviously don't line up with these extrusions here, so that is where these come in. I'm going to put these at the back, and then that will mount into there, into a channel nut. On the other end I'll have these, and that is just to space it out to make it level. It's just a 20mm packer that I drilled through with a hole saw. Now firstly I just want to lift it, make sure it doesn't impede on where the compressor is. I'm just wondering whether I cut straight down here to get rid of that bit of metal. That'll help it fit up if the compressor needs to be moved. It's kind of unnecessary, that little portion of it. All it's doing is setting it further back, so it would be easier to get items in and out at an angle. But I've actually got 20mm spacers there, so that gap past this part of the Canopy opening is 20mm bigger than it would normally be anyway. So I don't need it to be set back as much. So I might cut these off with a grinder. I'll just see what it looks like first. So to get it up, I just tied up the back end and got the bolts in one side, and then I went back to the other side to get those bolts in. So nuts and bolts 0.420, we used quite a few channel nuts and mounting nuts, so the total weight added is 8.445 after we removed these offcuts. Now this carpet comes from the drawer combo inside. I'm taking it out, and I'm taking out the weight of all these accessories because I have a separate list running now for accessories, and I'll keep the things on the car completely separate. So I look at the Canopy shelf from back to the front, taking up the full length. You can see where I've made those cuts there, just in front of the welds, and you can see the spacers that I've used. Now this shelf has heaps of places to add tie down points. You can see how deep it is when you look from down below. It pushes right back to the compressor. Now I did move the compressor, and in hindsight I could have left those edges on. Because I pushed it so far back into the Canopy, it wouldn't have actually been obstructing me getting it up. Cutting that edge off does give me a bit better access to these GPOs. And there's just a look at the headroom in there. It's 170mm, a little bit higher in between the extrusions. Alright, that's it for that one. So I did move the compressor a little bit closer to the fridge just so I could set the drawers further back, which gives me more angle from the front of the Canopy door here, just to get things up and in there. So that's it, not a whole lot to that install. I had to add in those 20mm struts because it didn't quite line up with my east-west struts in the roof. But even if it did, I think I would have at least added some sort of spacer in there anyway, just to get that little bit of extra room to get things up and into the overhead shelf. So largely that is the end of the sort of internals of the canopy. There'll be small changes and things like that, but no more big ticket items for the time being anyway. So although it was a bit more expensive than I would have liked, it is handy to have, and it's good that it's all done now. Gives me a bit of segregation in the way things are stacked on the right hand side of the car. If the swag and stretcher and everything takes up the floor space, I can have some things separated up top that I either don't use as often or would like to keep separate for keeping them clean. I can also hang things off the overhead shelf. I want to make up some sort of bracket for a hot water system that I can just hang onto the shelf and then plug the hoses and the gas hoses in. But we'll see how we go with that down the track. So the shelf was $6.95. The other components is just channel nuts and the bolts and washers. That's it for that one. We'll jump to the end screen with the total build costs and weights. Not a lot. It's basically just nut and bolts. 1200mm. They do